Well, hello again, guys, from here at Whitley Park, Newcastle United Media and Scouting HQ. Now, we're going to start the video outside rather than next to the pitch today, because of the competing sound of Newcastle United training through the trees and a lawnmower right in my ear too. So yeah, we'll give it a go out here. And tellingly, in the window just at the top there, 5 or 10 minutes ago, I saw several of the Newcastle scouts, the recruitment team, walking in. I said to Steve Nixon, "Are you busy?" He said, "Yes." I said, "I'd be worried if you said you weren't." So yeah, what's happening in those windows up there, guys? And on transfers and recruitment and ins and outs is where we're going to start, because in the bottom window, we've just been talking to Eddie Howe. And for the first time, he is committed to, in public, saying that Newcastle probably do need to sell in January. He was asked that direct question, do you need to sell to buy? And he said trading in a PSR world is essential. That is in and out, unless your revenue streams are gargantuan. And he said ours aren't right now. They aren't where they want them to be. They are working on that, but that probably does mean players, if they're coming in, players do need to go out as well. And he said what they wanted to avoid, as the lawnmower and the tractor, actually it's chasing me. Here it is, I thought I'd escaped it. He said what they want to avoid is I want to avoid getting knocked over. So yeah, we'll step on the curb. We'll let him pass. I wonder what he thinks on transfers. There we go. Actually, that might mean we're free now to go closer to the pitch. But anyway, where was I? Yeah, and he said what they want to avoid is a situation like in June where they're having to sell players they don't want to sell. But he said in football, you never do know. And that leads me on to the story I wrote yesterday about Bruno Guimaraes, an interest from Manchester City. Now, I see a lot of other aggregators and different publications have taken this, put a little bit of gravy on it and turned it into something it perhaps wasn't in terms of my copy. But in my Newcastle Confidential column, I revealed that Bruno does figure on Manchester City's shortlist of midfielders. This is really good information I've had out of Manchester, and he is there on the insistence, I am told, of Pep Guardiola. We know Pep loves him. We know why he loves him. I can see him being a real Pep type player, someone who does keep the ball, someone who is clever, someone who understands game management. Everything about Bruno, I've always thought, and you guys might not like me saying this, screams Pep Guardiola, screams Manchester City a little bit, but that's because he's a good player. He's a brilliant player. I think he's still struggled a little bit for consistency this season, and that was as much to do because of the shape he returned. And he was out of shape when he returned at the start of the season. I think, him himself would admit that. What we've seen in recent weeks, a little bit more, I feel, and certainly on Wednesday night against Liverpool, moved in that number 8 position with 2 assists and just an all-round different performance really in terms of what he's been offering this season. And that was the Bruno we know, and that was him at his very best. And that is why Newcastle felt safe, felt comfortable putting that £100 million release clause in there, because if he was going to go, they thought someone might just bite at that price. As it turned out, they didn't. And I honestly, personally, never thought anyone would go close to £100 million as much as I think he's good. I don't think he's £100 million good, but nonetheless, I think he's still a fantastic player, and it's no wonder there are admirers out there. Now, my information is that Manchester City, given the problems they've got with Rodri, Kovacic, and even beyond that, beyond this season, they brought Ilkay Gundogan back. Gundogan hasn't worked. They want to sign 2 midfielders, and Bruno features on that short list. Now, what does that mean for January? I must admit, guys, I'd be surprised. I think Bruno might be one for down the line, in part because there will absolutely be resistance from Newcastle to a January sale for their captain and for someone who is so integral. Beyond that, and you might not want to hear it, I do think this summer, if Newcastle aren't in the Champions League, which it's looking probably unlikely that they're not going to be, I do think they're good enough and capable and will mount a revival of their season. They're 12th at the moment. I do think they will finish in a European place, if not Champions League. But if that's the case, I think it will be time that one of those bigger players goes. What names would you put in there? Well, it's the obvious 3, Gordon, Bruno, and Alexander Isak too. So Bruno in Manchester City, it's there, guys. It's always been there. My information is that is likely to be renewed, probably more likely in the summer. But it's one to keep an eye on. And the player himself, would he want to go? Well, he's 27 now. He's given 3 years of absolutely brilliant service to Newcastle. A really charismatic character came in. He was responsible as much as anyone for taking the club and the team on that upward trajectory. As a person, as a player, I've got all the time in the world for him, even though there's been points where I've been frustrated and called for him to give more. He's given more now. He, like the team, has got to find that level consistently. But I do think, and I would forgive a player like Bruno if at the age of 27, approaching 28, and he's at a club that aren't in the Champions League and he's got one there who want him, I would honestly forgive him wanting to go. And I think Newcastle, perhaps not Eddie Howe, even though he is accepting of the situation, as he said in his answer to us this morning, I do think the hierarchy beyond that, Paul Mitchell and others would look at that type of sale. As they did, listen, that release clause was there for a reason. Newcastle believed this summer might be the one where Bruno moved on. It didn't quite happen for several reasons, but beyond this season, maybe it will. And that's not me trying to sell Newcastle's players. I know a lot of you guys come back and say, why are you writing this story today after a great game, a great night against Liverpool? Well, I don't choose when I get information, guys. You know, you put it out there. Same reason the feature on Anthony Gordon was written ahead of playing Liverpool. It's newsy, it's timely. You know, we don't do things to be helpful or unhelpful. We're journalists. We put it out there when the timing is right and when that information comes into you. And my information right now is that, yes, Bruno does feature on Manchester City's shortlist. So wait and see. Now, I've come back inside here, guys. I like it inside next to the pitches, although you wouldn't think so. I've only ever played here once, and I didn't even play. I was an unused substitute in a cup final, which thankfully the team won. But yeah, I was watching on from one of those dugouts down there. That was a long time ago, 20 years and more. But anyway, so by extension, on the subject of Bruno, and of course in the last two, we've seen Bruno move to the 8 and Tonali populate the 6. And it's become a little bit of a running joke. Eddie Howe knows my obsession with the midfield 3. I do have that midfield 3 wall chart at home, which I update after every game. Am I joking there? Well, I'll let you decide. But no, I am fixated with it because I've always said, as a talking there about myself playing, I was a midfielder when I played in various Northeast academies. So I've always felt, rightly or wrongly, that position in that area ultimately dictates and determines how a team functions as a whole. And because Newcastle's midfield for me for so long now has been some good, some bad, some indifferent, it's been a general malfunctioning, if you like, that's been the reason for the inconsistency and for the malaise. Look at Newcastle's last 6 in terms of form. 1-2, lost 2, drawn 2. They're struggling to hit upon something consistent. That is wider, of course it is, but it's in the midfield, I think, which will unlock the consistency. And Eddie Howe was asked about this morning. Why hasn't Sandro Tonali been used as a 6? When he came in from Milan, I thought he was a 6. You know, he played in a 2 there. I thought he was going to be used in that central area. I think a lot of you guys did too, especially as that summer and since Newcastle have been crying out for a 6, really. Well, Eddie kind of rejected that and said the reason there's been the delays because he believes Bruno is one of the best number 6s in the Premier League. And it's been a case of keeping Bruno in a position where he feels happy, where Howe believes he performs. Well, the last 2, it's been different. And I think the team, certainly against Liverpool, was all the better for it. And sometimes just giving players something different to think about is as good as anything else. We spoke last week, didn't we, about the side going stale and the squad going stale because of a lack of investment. Well, just a little change of position. I honestly think Tonali has thrived from being in the 6. I've said this before. He seems to love the responsibility. The swagger is back. When he plays in the 8, there's a little bit of huff, a little bit of puff. As a 6, he stands there. He's more that majestic gladiator, the one we've spoken about, and he set the tone right from the off on Wednesday night, went up in the left wing position, he vacates the 6 and he's charging down the full-back, but he just seemed inspired by that. Tonali's got to continue at the 6. Likewise, Bruno in the 8, hadn't he gone a little bit stale in the 6? He seems to have that renewed vigour and enthusiasm and that brilliant little dribble for the first assist there for Alexander Isak. He hasn't done that in the 6th position. When he has a dribble in the 6th, it's invariably to try and get his body and his backside in the way and fall over and win a free kick. No, use that and then get away from someone. He did that. So keep those 2 in that position going down to Brentford. Now, I honestly think that now was the way going forward. A week ago, guys, what did I do the entire video about when I was walking around Gosford? I said the only avenue left to explore in the midfield is Tonali 6 and Bruno 8. He did it the next day down at Palace, and there was, listen, I think it was actually a little bit better at Palace. What actually let them down there was what happened in the final third, or rather what didn't happen in the final third. Nothing happened in the final third. Well, they went to Wednesday, and all of a sudden, those building blocks had, I'm confusing the analogies here, those building blocks had the cherry on the top. You get what I mean, because Isak was firing, because Gordon was firing, and that was the general tone of the press conference there this morning with Eddie. It was the same question asked in various ways, and the tone of that was, why do you guys do it against the very best and not against the lesser teams? And I know this was the tone of my video on Wednesday night after Liverpool. And the question I put to Eddie was, you looked at Tottenham last night against Bournemouth, they lose. Last weekend against Fulham, they drew. What was the result before that? They won 4-0 against Manchester City. All the praise in the world, you know, they've turned a corner, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And they didn't. And you knew they didn't. And that's the fear and that's the worry with Newcastle. I don't necessarily fancy them to go down to Brentford and win tomorrow. I'll come to my prediction in just a moment, but I don't, and I can't. And that is based on what we've seen in the last 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games. Go back the entire season, really. I don't necessarily like Newcastle in a lot of away games. Listen, Forest was brilliant, but then they come back and play against West Ham and Crystal Palace, and you think, well, okay, how can you get too excited and believe that Forest is actually the blueprint and what they're going to do going forward? Because then it wasn't down at Palace. And on the whole, this season, I really haven't liked them away from home. I haven't liked the body language. And that is what Eddie come back to this morning in his own way, in his own words. And he kept on talking about attitude and application. And this, again, what I said on Wednesday night, the quality is there. Eddie said the same to us. They've got to find the attitude and the application to complement that. When you do that, it allows the quality to shine. And right now, can they? Well, that is the big question, really, because if you don't want to be Spursy, and this was the question I put to Eddie, what have you got to do to guard against that? And yeah, he said it's attitude, it's application. The best players do it every week. They do. You know, the elite players, what made Messi, Ronaldo, I know that's taking it to extremes, but the best players in the Premier League, they turn up every week. Right now, Newcastle's very best players, and this is a compliment, but they're not doing it every week. It's not to say they can't, because they've shown last season, they've shown the season before. Anthony Gordon last season, goodness, he went every week. He was outstanding. He was incredibly defied the general norm of physicality, the speed and the pace and the aggression, the intensity he had week on week, coupled with the output. Hasn't quite been there this season. It was on Wednesday night, so I would say it to Gordon, to Isaac, to others, to all of them, to Bruno, to Tonali, go and do it again at Brentford. That is when you will snap from being this team that's currently 12th. This team is 12th. How can they play like that against Liverpool, a side who had just beaten Real Madrid and Manchester City without conceding a goal, and worry them and rattle them and give them their hardest game of the season, and yet come out of that round of fixtures in 12th in the Premier League? They're better than that. It's madness. It's wrong. Do something about it, starting at Brentford. What will happen down at Brentford? Now, I'm not going to Newcastle's draw at Brentford. I've actually got a commitment up here. I'll be at the training ground. My oldest boy, my little boy, is playing a match inside the academy. So the prediction I'm going for, and again, I keep on saying I've been fairly good with these recently. Well, I've been good in terms of predicting the nature of the performance, if not the results on the back of it. I thought Newcastle would win on Wednesday night. My reason for that was I thought there would be the response. I'm not convinced of the response and the continuation tomorrow. I hope it's there, which is why, for once, I don't regularly populate fences, but I'm going to this weekend. I think they'll get a draw. Brentford have got that tremendous home record, the best in the Premier League. I think it is. Their fast start, Newcastle will have to be guarded against that, but I do think there's enough momentum from a midweek game to take that into Saturday at Brentford and just come away without getting beat. But most importantly, I know given the R12, they actually do need points sooner rather than later to climb the table, but the performance, the manner of it, the attitude, all the words Eddie used, that's what I'll be looking for down at Brentford. And if they can come away unbeaten with a much improved performance, and listen, can they win it? Of course they can win it, especially against a team who probably will want a little bit more of the ball at home. With that home record to protect, Newcastle might find that space to exploit. And Brentford has always been a pretty happy place to go. I'm devastated I'm not going. I'll love a beer afterwards down by the Thames, normally reflecting on a Newcastle victory. So I'm sad I'm not there. Now, what will Eddie Howe do in terms of the team? Quick little update in terms of Kieran Trippier's availability. He is improving. Eddie said he missed out on Wednesday because of illness, and a call will be made today. Apart from that, it appears everyone, bar the usual long-term absentees, Jamal Lascelles and Sven Botman, everyone is available. He said there's a little bit of cramp for Tonali, fatigue for Gordon, for Isaac, but decoding Eddie and fitness updates, that means they'll be perfectly fine. And the question is, does he keep it the same or does he change it? He loves Joe Linton on the wings away from home, especially now. I wouldn't put Joe Linton back on the left, maybe on the right in place of Jacob Murphy, even though Murphy would be unlucky, because now they've got Gordon on the left and he's played the way he has. You've got to keep him there, certainly for this game. I wouldn't switch Anthony Gordon's position, not after the manner in which he played, and that response and the celebration and everything else. You know, he seems fired up and motivated now. Keep him where he wants to be. But in midfield, if Joe Linton does go back to the right, he might want to bring in one of those runners, a Longstaff or a Willock. That's certainly, they seem to be better away from home with that type of player in there. But as we've seen with Eddie, generally, when they do have that nature of performance, and they were brilliant against Liverpool, they were, you know, only a draw, but you cannot fault them really, even though they conceded 3. I thought they defended well enough. He normally leaves it unchanged, and I think he will be unchanged down at Brentford. Well, that's it for me for now, guys. Please comment below the line. What team would you play tomorrow? Do you know, is there that danger that just on the back of a good performance you keep the same 11 when you're actually better mixing things up and playing horses for courses. What 11 would you play? What would you do in that midfield with Tonali, Bruno and Joe Linton? Do you dare not risk disturbing that? Keep the three of them together? I think you've probably got to. I wouldn't like to take Joe Linton out of that midfield three now. Give him a run, given that was the best the midfielders looked all season on Wednesday night. And in terms of what I started this video with, the come-ins, the go-ins, the ins, the outs, who do you want? Who would you let go? What do you think of Bruno perhaps going at the end of the season? Where do you stand on that? Because there is necessity there, guys. There is going to have to be a big sale at some point. But in the meantime, again, I don't know if I've said this already, hit like, comment, subscribe, super thanks, everything else. Thank you so much for watching. For those of you watching around the world, there's meant to be a storm coming. It's absolutely glorious here today. Okay, take care, guys. See you soon. Bye-bye.